I had been looking for this documentary for probably over a year. It said it was on Amazon Prime. I could not find it. Found out it was just released in the UK, but just found it today. Typed it in Amazon Prime. What documentary am I talking about? Four Kings. To say this was a powerful documentary is like saying Georgia has a couple trees, man. This documentary is powerful, man. It covers Chris Eubanks Sr. and his fights with Nigel Benn. Talks about the Lennox Lewis and Frank Bruno, man. It is powerful. And it shows the dangers of the sport, the emotion, a lot what Jim Lampley was talking about, it was nice to see at the end Nigel Benn and Chris Eubank Sr. on stage, and Chris Eubank admitted that Nigel Benn won that second fight. He said that Nigel got robbed. So I thought that was pretty cool of him to admit that. A lot of fighters don't admit stuff like that even decades later, to be like, nah, man, I won. Like Don King said after Lennox Lewis got robbed in the first fight with Holyfield, he's like, who am I to question the judges? But man, that was powerful. And I had said before when I was talking about Jarrell Miller how Lennox Lewis never got personal. I remember he kind of did because Hasim Rockman said something about him. And it got kind of personal, something Lennox Lewis said, but Hasim took it there first. But something Lewis said that bothered Frank Bruno up until recently when he called him my Uncle Tom. And he kept saying Frank Bruno kept saying even after his fight that when he beat Oliver McCall, he kept saying, I'm not an Uncle Tom. I'm not an Uncle Tom, because even Oliver McCall took that and used it in the press conference. So that really bothered him, but still Lewis didn't talk about he didn't talk about Frank's family or nothing like that. But spoiler alert, they meet at the end. Turn the sound down if you don't want to hear what happens, but they meet at the end and they squash their beef. Lennox Lewis, he tells Frank at one point, you got to be kind of thick-skinned, but then he says, I probably would have said it differently. If I could go back and because Frank Bruno was still mad. He was saying Lennox Lewis wasn't his cup of tea. He was still upset about it. And he was telling Lewis, because Lewis didn't like how Frank Bruno was dressing like a woman and stuff like that. And Frank was saying, hey, I was doing whatever I had to do to, make some money at the time. But you can't sell your integrity, Mr. Frank. But they squashed their beef. Man, that was powerful. They talked about the sad situations with Gerald McClellan and Nigel Benn. That was very sad. They talked about the Michael Watson incident with Chris Eubanks Sr. Man, this was powerful, man. Chris Eubanks Sr. went over to meet the guy that he injured in the ring, Michael Watson, and he said, do you hold it against me? He's like, no, it wasn't your fault. He's basically saying it's part of the sport. And Chris Eubank was just crying in his arms and saying what a tough guy that guy is to say something like that. Man, this documentary brought a tear to Jay Roos's eye, man. That's how powerful it is. I just love boxing, man. I just love boxing. I'm a boxer. It's in my DNA. That's what it is. And this was so powerfully done. The music, the stories, how everybody was candid about, certain things that I didn't know about. They show footage that I hadn't seen. I hate when you see a documentary you've been waiting for and they don't really tell you anything you didn't already know. There's so many Muhammad Ali documentaries out there. It's like, what can we learn? And we've heard everything pretty much. But man, it showed a lot of press conferences I hadn't seen between Lennox Lewis and Frank Bruno. It got pretty heated. And man, them dudes could punch. Nigel Benn could punch. Chris Eubanks Sr. could punch. Lennox Lewis, of course, can punch. Frank Bruno can punch. I like the part where they show Chris Eubanks Sr. posing in the ring, and then they show Nigel Benn posing. It was pretty hard. Thank me later. Go watch this documentary, man. I give it 2 thumbs up. If I had 4, I give it 4 thumbs up. How about 2 thumbs up and then 2 big toes, man? That documentary was well worth the wait. It's called Four Kings. One of the best, if not the best, boxing documentary I've ever seen. You all know Lennox Lewis is my favorite fighter of all time. If you didn't know, now you know. And man, that fight with Frank Bruno was in 1993, October. I still remember that. I saw it as it was happening. Wow. It was just talking about how those fighters were the biggest in like UK history. They got Ricky Hatton into boxing and some others, and they just inspired a whole generation. You know, we talk about all the American fighters that inspire us, but the UK played a big part. Boxing started in the UK, so we got to show them the proper respect, and it's come full circle. Heavyweights from the UK used to not get respect until Lennox Lewis, and they didn't accept him at first because they considered him Canadian. But once he got that crazy decision that was a draw against Holyfield, the Brits took a liking to him, and they haven't looked back since. Feel like I'm forgetting something, but it was so many powerful moments in that. But that was big of Chris Eubank to admit that Nigel Benn beat him in that second fight when it was ruled a draw. Still don't know how that Lewis Holyfield first fight was. Well, I know what was going on, the politics, but Lewis got the victory in the second fight, which was closer than the first one. So if the Lewis won the second one, I know he won the first one. You go watch Lewis Holyfield one, that was like you'd be hard pressed to give Holyfield any rounds in that fight, and they said it was a draw. Eugenia, what was her name? That judges said she couldn't see the action because Lennox Lewis's shoulders were too broad. Eugenia Williams. I gotta ask Jim Lampley about that because they were talking to her after that debacle of a fight. We had waited for Undisputed, then we got that, man. But Jim Lampley and Larry Merchant let her have it when she was on HBO being questioned. But man, can't say it enough. Go watch that documentary, Four Kings, Amazon Prime. Anyway, this is the J. Roos Theory. If you want to become a member, hit that below. You know what that says? It says join. Hit that. The Cash App $ J. Roos 33, the backup platform in WJ, the Instagram, the J. Roos Theory, LSR forever, and be fearless. Boxing is the best sport. It just is. That's just what it is. That's why we compare it to life. Or compare life to boxing.